We got college football playoff rankings. Really, not a lot changed. Let me pull these bad boys up real quick for you. But it was pretty much the same as last week. Georgia 1, Alabama 2, Oregon 3, Ohio State 4, Cincinnati 5, Michigan at 6, Michigan State at 7. Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, and Wake Forest will round out the top 10 right there for you. Other Big Ten teams making appearances, Wisconsin at 15. And I think they've earned that just based off of how they've played the back half of the year. Iowa's sitting there at 17. And I think that is a very precarious 17 for Iowa. Before we get into the meat of this, there's one thing I wanted to talk about with this CFP rankings release. And I had a real issue a week ago when the committee moved Michigan over Michigan State following Michigan State's loss to Purdue. Because to me, the head-to-head result was so recent that it would be very hard to discount it. And Purdue is a team who had shown that they can beat great teams. They're not a great team themselves, so that's not a good loss for Michigan State. But they played 10 days before the rankings came out, and they had the gall to jump Michigan over Michigan State. And so Gary Barta was asked about that again this week, and his response was, set aside watching the games, though that's certainly a part of it, but statistically, in just about every category, offensively and defensively, Michigan comes out on top over Michigan State. So 2 issues for this. Number one, they played the game, and statistically, they came out on the losing end, the scoreboard. Very important. The result should matter. But number 2, and this is where it really irks me, is if we are going to set aside watching the games, then why the hell don't we give it back to the computers? If you're just going to look at stats and you're going to look at numbers and you're not going to watch the football games, give it back to the computers, because they will use a head-to-head result for other teams as, oh, well, we can't do X, Y, and Z. But in this case, they're just so willing to throw it out. It's the inconsistency that really just gets on my nerves with this.
Well, I think you can make that argument for Oregon and Ohio State, right? I know that Oregon has the head up, but the way Ohio State's been playing recently, and Oregon having that bad loss to Stanford, who's a 3-5 football team, and I think Purdue has shown a better propensity to be able to go out and beat a really good football team than Stanford has, with the exception of Oregon. So, but it's funny you say this, because there's an old saying, I believe the last time I heard the quote was Ron Rivera, when he left Carolina, and it was figures lie and liars figure, right? I think this game, football, there's so many elements that go into it. There's so many uncontrollable factors that when you sit there and try to rely on statistics to tell the story or to value something over another, unlike any other sport, all that stuff's out the window in football. And I think that's a really good point. And when you do watch the tape, I think Michigan's a very good football team. I think Michigan State is a very good football team. And both of them have some games here ahead of them to be able to prove it. And I think it's going to work itself out. But rankings are rankings, and people are going to do what they want to do. But like I said, to sit there and justify that by numbers and statistics, I think that again, they just kind of it shouldn't be the justification. They shouldn't even have a justification, because I'm sure if you look at the offensive statistics with Ohio State to Oregon,
right,
it's probably very skewed to Ohio State, and they're still sitting behind Oregon. So when you start making justifications like that, and it's not uniform across the board, and there's really no formula for it, you're kind of setting yourself up to get shots fired your direction. And to me, I'd avoid that at all costs. I'd just say, this is what we value, and keep it moving. So I do agree with you. When people start talking and opening their mouths, it oftentimes gets them in trouble.
Yeah, and I feel like the committee is losing a lot of trust right now in the viewers in college football consumers, which is a bad thing. But I think there's some part of the stakeholders, and what I mean by that is the teams that are playing that are probably losing trust in what this committee is doing. And you said something that I think is probably the bigger point to me, is Michigan and Michigan State have games down the line here that will get this whole thing sorted out. I 100% believe that. And it's the same reason why I still believe that Oregon, you can justify having them in front of Ohio State, is they will each have games at the end of the year that will sort this out. Ohio State's got a gauntlet coming up. And if they can move through that, then they deserve to be the higher ranked team. Oregon doesn't have those same type of games. So if they're not dominant, they don't go out there and look like what the number 3 team should look like, then you're probably going to see a flip-flop. But the whole point is letting that play out. It's not about saying, well, we looked at the stats and we just made a decision, especially a couple of weeks after the game actually happened on the field.
Yep. Yeah, justify it exactly how you just did. Say that there's games left and it'll figure itself out. To me, that shows a bigger understanding, right? And I think that you'd gain more trust within that fan base that you were talking about. But yeah, man, I wouldn't want to be those guys making those decisions. And quite frankly, I've been a proponent of it since the beginning of the year and since the Field of 12 became the Field of 12. I think that we definitely need to start talking some type of expansion. And I think the timing couldn't be more perfect in terms of what's gone on in college football this year and the depth of teams across the country. The timing's perfect, and all the stuff going on, Texas, Oklahoma leaving, trying to go to the SEC. It's going to be really hard to narrow down to 4, I think, consistently.
Yep. I agree with you on that. I think, and I have not been a fan of expansion necessarily, because in most years you feel like there probably aren't more than 6 teams that could actually truly win it all. And this year has been so different. The parity that you mentioned, the fact that we feel like a team that's sitting maybe even at 13, 14 this year could have a case. It's very unique, and a lot of these issues get sorted out. The difference between being 6 and 7, like y'all are both getting in, so you can prove it.
What I will say is unlike years past, because I do agree with you, years past, really the past 5 or 6 years, there was a clear cut, like right at that 4 or 5 spot, right? Like anyone else after that really didn't have a shot. To me, one of the biggest reasons for this is the transfer portal now, and the demand on kids to be able to step on campus and want to play. And we touched on that earlier, or maybe it was on the After Dark show. I touched on it, but like the expectation for kids now is at 18 years old, you need to come in and make an impact. Whereas even 7, 8 years ago, when you came on campus, there was a learning curve for the most part. It was a, hey, sit down, buy your time, learn the system, develop, all kinds of different things went on. Now at 18 years old, you're expected to come in and make an impact, and kids have that expectation. And when that doesn't happen, they're automatically looking, all right, where can I go and play right now? What can I go do play right now? And I think that has led to this depth, and you've seen it. I mean, look at Michigan State. Michigan State did a great job in the transfer portal this year, and they've completely went 180. So I think it's only going to continue to be a trend, and I think it's only going to add more depth and spread the talent across college football. As long as, there's always going to be opportunities to go play, and kids, as long as kids try and seek those out, I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for it. And that's why I say I think it's like the perfect storm, and I think you really need to start letting these kids go out and play.
It'll be a really interesting thing. And I'm looking forward to the day when it finally comes.